Okay, so this might be more a question for you, and it might be silly, but like we talk a lot about like, oh, your editor might not like this, or the writing group might not like this. But do you ever worry like the opposite, like people like influencing people? Because like sometimes people really really like.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you ever worry,
it's a little weird.
You write about someone who's depressed or having a depressing time or questioning their religion or something like that, and like, do you ever worry about like affecting people?
In that way, not as much, because I feel that I try to write real characters, like people, realistic. You know, that when you look at them, there's a depth to them. They're a person, and they may be struggling with something like that, but anymore, I don't think that would have any more influence on someone than a friend doing it. And this is just sort of the thing that we deal with in life. There are certain other things that I wonder about. You know, one of which is at what point do we cross the line into glorifying violence? That's a problem, I think, for all action-oriented storytelling, and that's a tough one. And you know, our society is too infatuated with violence, I feel. Other ones, you know, there are people who really, really, really get into books, and boy, I appreciate them, and I love that they do that. And at the same time, I think, you know, that William Shatner skit where he's like, it's only, you know, have you guys seen this thing from Saturday Night Live where he gets up and people are asking questions, and finally, after a few minutes, he says, "Get a life, people." And I wouldn't say that, but what he's getting at is it is just a story. And at the end of the day, I hope that reading my books is not becoming so fascinating to people that they're letting other things lapse in their lives. We are too entertainment-focused a society as well. And good books, I believe, I'm a little bit biased, have a good place in any person's healthy entertainment regimen. But you know, if you're reading books 8 hours a day, I'm worried. Unless you know you're a closet, you know, you're a 14-year-old bookworm, then yeah, you're probably all right because you know. But you know, at the same time, someone's pointing at each other. At the same time, you know, that there are lots of good things that people should be doing, and reading books is actually pretty low on that list. And so I don't want to be feeding addictions to the point that it's distracting from other important things in people's lives. So those are things I think about.
What should our target word count be for chapters? Because I'm realizing as I go back and revise that I have 10 or 12,000 word chapters. I don't know if that's okay.
10 or 12,000 is on the long end. You're probably okay, but it is on the long end. Your target length for a chapter should be dependent on what you're trying to achieve for the chapter. And if it has a good arc, beginning, middle, and end, then that's what you should be writing for. There is no set chapter length. There are a lot of people who will write, you know, Dan Brown writes 3-page chapters or 2-page chapters. Terry Pratchett does not put chapters in most of his books. They are one single long chapter with viewpoint breaks. And Robert Jordan liked 5,000 and 6,000 word chapters that were big and meaty. 5,000 and 6,000 is considered pretty big and meaty. So 10, 12,000 is really big, but if it's got a bit beginning, middle, and end, you know, yeah.
Okay, and going off of that, the only thing like I think right now is the Hunger Games, where every chapter ends on like some immensely cliffhanging thing.
Yeah, that's yeah.
It's like a strategy, but it seems really annoying. So how do you know? Because me, I just write the storyline in general. So how do you know where to divide it up into chapter breaks?
You should start practicing as you write. I would suggest building beginning, middle, end to a scene, and getting a sense for this is an end of a scene, and letting a chapter break be there, or at least a scene break. What the Hunger Games is doing is what in the industry we call thriller plotting. Thriller plotting is, in thrillers, they want to use their chapters as a way to yank you through the story. And they will do this by ending every chapter with some sort of hook. A really powerful one, and then they try to begin the next chapter with a powerful hook as well. And so this comes down to what type of chapter writing you want to do. We've talked about this a little bit, but what they are doing is they're usually doing very short chapters, and the chapters kind of do introduce a problem, get there, and then often break right here where the first thing goes wrong. Normally, where your first try fail cycle, they try and it goes wrong, or they open the door that they've been trying to get to, and behind the door is, it's the end of Lost Season 1, right? The light turns on. John has been digging at this thing for a while, and he can't get it open, and he bonks it, and boom, a light goes on. It ends with a question. If you want to be better at this, watch shows that use this type of plotting. Lost is a good one. Or read Hunger Games is good. Most thrillers will do this. They want short bursts that make you turn the page, and then they'll actually denouement a little bit in the chapter. They'll have a little bit of action actually, and then they'll denouement, and then they'll ask another question, and they'll cut like this, so that you're never stopping it at the end of a denouement. Because the idea being, if you stop at the end of a denouement, then you have a little bit of a sigh of relief, and you can put the book down. And so their philosophy is that if you're doing this, that you're always cutting right here to keep them reading the book. I don't do that. I do it occasionally, you'll notice, but when I do it, if you read my books, watch for times I do this. Usually what I'm actually doing is I'm chopping in half a 2-chapter sequence that's really 1 chapter that's a given scene. And I feel that I'm going to use a little bit of this trick right here to pull you through that little sequence. But usually what I'm doing is I'm having longer, my chapters are usually 3,000 to 4,000 words. And what I'm doing is we're having a beginning, middle, and end, and then I cut. Sometimes I'll cut right there. I'll have a little question or things like this. And then, beginning, middle, end, and then I cut. And this is because instead of thriller pacing, I'm trying to do epic pacing, which is you get a big, meaty chunk that pulls you into the world and gives you this, fulfilling sense of world building, and it's long and it's kind of thick, and by the end, we let you take a break and relax and put the book down if you want to. Very different styles of storytelling. I usually will let you put the book down. I build into my book's breakpoints, and that's partially because it works really well to read Hunger Games in 1 or 2 sittings. Way of Kings does not work in 1 or 2 sittings. And so I have the danger of overloading people, whereas where Hunger Games doesn't have as much of a danger. So, is it on this topic? Yeah.
Concerning what, I find that I do more of like a viewpoint pacing, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like it's a chunk of viewpoint, and it might be 3 chapters,
Uh-huh.
and kind of
Yeah.
viewpoint changes, and it's
Yeah.
something completely
Yep.
different. Is that?
Yeah, Robert Jordan did that in a lot of his books too. And almost when you're doing that, what I've seen work best is what you're trying to do is you're almost like you're telling a short story in the world, and you want to make sure those 3 chapters have their own kind of little mini 3-act format or something, where it's like chapter 1, we're introducing the problem, we're struggling with it, we're working on some things. Chapter 2, we tried something and it's not working at all. What do we do now? Chapter 3, okay, we've worked through it, we've pulled it out, end of viewpoint, jump. Some people actually have them get to the end and then leave the cliffhanger and then jump to another group of characters. I really, that can be bothersome, but I've used it before too. So these are all tools to use at different points and different times. So how do you do that? I mean, it is a good tool to learn how to use, but the thing to be aware of thriller plotting is it gets tedious. You feel like you can't put the book down, but at the same time that makes you frustrated with it, because if the writer does it, it feels like they're doing dirty tricks. The example of this is, they build up, Dan Brown does this in the Da Vinci Code. He builds up this, one of the characters, Sophie, saw some terrible thing. Learn she opened a door and saw some terrible thing on the other side, and like a good dozen times through the chapter, it's like, and then she remembered that day when she opened the door and saw, and then like the chapter ends, and then she gets interrupted in her thing in the next chapter and doesn't tell you because something big happens, or she opened the door and then and then, you know, the guy next to her got shot, and she's jumped back into this time, or she's telling someone, you know, about this experience, and then he gets shot or something. And it's like you almost get the answer, and every time you almost get the answer, it builds up how cool that answer has to be. And so it leads to the potential of ultimate, when you get the answer, it's problematic because the answer is not as cool as it's been built up to be. That's one of the problems with thriller plotting. People notice this about a lot about Lost, that the answers were nowhere near as cool as the questions were. And J.J. Abrams is really good at this. And so what you'll see J.J. doing, particularly in that first season of Lost, is whenever he gives an answer, he gives a cooler question alongside it. So when you have a mixed feeling of, well, that answer wasn't that cool, but that question is awesome, so obviously it's going to have the real answer. And so I will keep following this question. So they just keep piling the questions on top of each other, but it gets it gets frustrating and annoying, and it's why it works really well in a short book and really poorly in a long book. But it's something you can study. It's certainly a tool that you can use. I think J.J. used it much better than Dan Brown did. Dan Brown, I got tired of it very quickly. If that book had been a third of the length that it was, I feel that I would have enjoyed it much more than I did, because having every chapter end with someone getting shot or an explosion or some, you know. Personally, this is just a hobby horse, but if you are going to end a chapter with they like to end a chapter with, and they open the door and that's one way to make a reader have a question to keep reading. I would rather have them open the door, find something so awesome behind that door that it changes your view on the book, and it's great, and you've got your answer. And the reason you keep reading is you want to find out the ramifications of that, not you want to keep finding out what's behind the door. But that's harder. It's much easier to do it the other way. And I will say that doing it the way that, you know, what's behind the door is so awesome is actually really tough. And I'm not sure that I'm even that great at it in all instances. So.